Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, I think now the time is right that we get into the main issue that brought us here. Brother Kawsu, you're welcome once again to Tony's question. And I note that on the 15th of December, you posted on Facebook that we totally reject the inclusion of secularism, secularism or secularity by either a constitutional provision or by an act of parliament. Our voices are clear. All conscious mind of the nation of the Gambia jointly reject the erroneous move. We want a spiritually enlightened society and not a devilish, confused one. That I would assume is a clear indication of your rejection of secularism. More so, I came across one too, that our history as a people will be defined with the pattern we choose to take in pursuit to attain the common good. These are all messages that I have got from you, and that made me conclude immediately that you are an individual who is not in support of secularism. And you warn that allowing secularism in the Gambia will be like opening the doors of hell towards the future of the Gambia. We reject it and we will never accept it. Those who are looking for a secular state can create their own, perhaps in Pluto, and establish secularism there if the environment allows it, in fact. More touchingly, I came across this one that warns strictly, and let me get to this one, that it doesn't game you play with falsehood, you will always perish with it. The truth will always stand. Your presence are not felt except that you are dividing people and causing fitna on earth in the name of some Arabic word? Different subject.
It's not on second.
Oh, on a different subject. Oh, that noted, because I was trying to do my little journalist work to gather information about what you entirely hold of secularism. And you have sent a strong message that the idea of secularism shall, in your own opinion, never be accepted in the Gambia. The first question, what is secular? May I put it to the audience that I want us to define the key terms involved. Let us not mix secularism and secular, or what amounts to secular state. So give us an overview of what secular meant, or secularism.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله إن أريد إلا الإصلاح وما توفيقي إلا بالله عليه توكلت وإليه أنيب ومن الناس من يجادل في الله بغير علم ولا هدى ولا كتاب منير صدق الله مولانا العظيم. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Respected members of the forum, I greet you all with the best of greetings. The greetings are from the traditions of Jesus, peace be upon him, as well as Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him too. Assalamu alaikum, peace and mercy and blessings of Allah be upon all of you. Amen. To do justice with the subject of secularism, I think we need to deal with it from the etymology. Now, secularism originates from the Greek and Roman philosophers, ones like Philosopher. Philosopher states that if a person wants to coin the term secularism or secularity, they need to understand that it is a separation, an advocacy that divides or that separates state affairs from religious philosophy and religious ideology. This is by the foundation of secularism. We understand when it comes to religious history, advocacy for secularism had been existing long before any place of had to be known as the Roman Empire or the Greek. Secularism is an advocacy that rejects the existence of God or the principles of God into the governing affairs of human beings. So we always try to divorce the terms that the word secular, in fact, doesn't mean secularism. And secularism also doesn't, in fact, mean a secular state. But actually, we need to know that the words are, they all share the same etymology. So they all represent the same philosophy. Dividing or separating the words would not make any sense to any sensible audience. So secularism, secularity, secular are a combination of advocacies that reject religious principles from governing affairs of humankind. Yes.
Quite clear there, and that is what, in fact, George Jacob Holyoake in 1847 propounded. In fact, he's the one who coined this term, secularism. And I have had a lot of definition of it, and I'm glad that at least here now, I'm in line with you, that it is a principle that advocates for the separation of the state from religion. Now, we live in a cosmopolitan society, different beliefs, different faiths, those who held one, those who don't even have one. And you know that it's a nation, a country or a state that has such society, even though we must admit that 95% of the population of the Gambia is Muslim. Knowing very well how diverse the country is or the state is, why is it a necessity that we do not separate the affairs of religion, that is the relationship between man and God, from the relationship between man and man, which concerns the state?
I think we are just welcoming a certain diversity, but the only diversity we have in the Gambia has to do with little cultural differences and so on. But we do not really have a diversity of philosophy in our country yet. We're just welcoming it. It has just been newly imported. For example, in countries like the United States, Europe, yes, we can talk about diversity in the United States. You have pure atheists, you have agnostics, you have people who are non-godly, you have those who are godly, you have people from different faiths. You can have Buddhists, you can have Sikhs, you can have Zoroastrians, you can have Jews, you can have Christians who have been living there for over a century or more. So they've been living in the diversity, and therefore they've been trying to incorporate and to welcome a system that will allow the existence of all these diverse beliefs and diverse ways of life in a multicultural society. But the Gambia is a Christian and Muslim dominant society. Since the invasion, before the invasion of the colonialists in the Gambia in the early 13th centuries, religion had already been living in the Gambia. For example, the Arab traders that came in the early 13th century, our people were already living on religious principles. So if you're talking about the foundations of the Gambia, it was founded on religion. And the religion is dominantly Islam. Muslims were living here, religion was governing the state for at least 3 centuries before the invasion of the colonialists, according to authentic historical facts. Now, when the colonialists invaded, of course, they used force to wipe away the ideologies, and they, of course, had some violent means that were used because they confronted with some religious clerics, marabouts, and so on. And therefore, they were able to conquer and implant the system of governance that advocates for a different system of legislation. Now, at the time, it would have been too hard to push forward for secularism, but yet the methods and the means used for the governance were also non-religious, and therefore they hide behind some religious calumnies, like Christianity, to build some churches and try to make the society understand that you can live in a multicultural, multi-diverse religious society without having problems, which is a true fact. But gradually, there was a hidden agenda that was supposed to be unpackaged. And that agenda is just what has been unpackaged today. That's what we discuss in secularism. Now, if you look at it from the biblical viewpoint and the Islamic viewpoint, both of them rejected. So if you're talking about a diverse community, the Gambia is dominantly Islam and Christianity. According to the statistics, we have about 95% Muslims, and we have about 3 to 4% Christians. Now, the philosophy and the beliefs of these two religions need to identify their commonalities and then put up a system of governance that will promote the beliefs and the ways of lives and the teachings of all these people that live in the country. That is what they define democracy to mean. So if you looked at the biblical viewpoint in the Galatians, the book called Galatians, chapter 1, verse 10 to 13, it says there, "Oh, we seek your protection against the foe, for vain is the salvation of man." So if you look at that verse, what it means, we seek God's protection against the foe. Who is the foe? The enemy. For the vain, plain, it's empty, the salvation. That means the system of governance, the authority that humankind can try to implant and govern itself with it. The Bible says, plain be that, and whoever advocates for that is a foe, is an enemy, and we need to collectively come together and pray against that person's influence and pray to God to protect us against whatever idea that person can bring, because those ideas are vain, they are empty, according to the biblical perspective. Now, if you come to the Islamic perspective as well, clearly in the glorious Quran, God Almighty warns us first. If you look at Surah Luqman, chapter 31, verse 20, Allah Almighty said there, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ among mankind, مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ are those who argue the reason, of course, concerning the affairs of God. بِغَيْرِ ilmin, without any certain fundamental knowledge that is beneficial, وَلَا hudan, and without any guidance, because guidance must be from a supernatural source. You need to be able to recline on something. You cannot guide yourself with fluctuative theories. And if you look at the theories of the Westerners, the origins of secularism, there's never a basic fundamental principle that is established and maintained as a governing principle for over a decade or centuries. It's always bound to fluctuation. It's always bound to changes. So God Almighty, wala huda, without any guidance, wala kitabin, and also without any book of authority, munir, that produces a light that a person can depend upon. And further, if you look at the Bible, the Christian community is warned against plagues. You know plagues. For example, during Ebola crisis, you know how the society was, a threat, how the society was living in an intense, environment. People are so much worried about their lives. And Jesus clearly warned against those plagues. If you look at the book of Revelations, the book of Revelations has a chapter 22, verse 18, it says there, I warn you that whoever shall hear these words, so that is not limited to those who only read the Bible, or those who only advocate for the biblical principles, or those who are pastors, but it refers to any other person who hears the message. I warn you, for anyone who hears this message, that whoever shall add unto the principles, that is the legislation, the words that have been prescribed, that has been revealed unto him, plagues shall be added unto them. That means their community shall be filtered, they shall be punished by God for their attempt to add onto a system of life, a system of authority that differs, or that is additional, or there is a concoction to the fundamental revelation that he purely received from his God. So the Gambia is a multi-religious society, but it depends, and then its focus is and is concentrated on two main dominant faiths, and both those faiths reject it, and that is why I said it has no room in the Gambia.
I'm not sure if all faiths reject it. You did quote from the Bible.
Both those two faiths, I mean, yeah.
Yes. I'm not sure of that. I'm saying you quote from the Bible.
Yes.
And may I draw attention to Matthew chapter 22, verse 21, where Jesus clearly said, give what belongs to Caesar, and then give what belongs to God.
Mm-hmm.
Now here, some people argue that Jesus himself recognized the separation of the political authority from the sacred authority. And to just draw a question from this, that Gambia was, one of the points that they claim to, is that Gambia was established based on religious principles. In 1887, 10th August 1887, in the Anglo-French conference, when the Europeans established, Europeans established this boundary called the Gambia today. And therefore we say Gambia is a product of a erroneous historical event, that is colonialism, that occurred. And therefore, prior to their arrival, there was no country called the Gambia. And there was no people called the Gambians. And on what basis then do we take it that it is us who build this nation based on religion?
You see, what you are raising, it is us. If you bring in an outsider to come and define my history for us, that is exactly what you are advocating for. Yes. What you are raising, the Westerner is clear. They came onto our continent. They only get to discover the presence and the existence, because those days you didn't have the satellites to know where a continent exists somewhere. You didn't have the cameras, the TV, the channels. So the Westerner only came to discover about the existence of my continent and its resources in about the 16th century. Now, my people were living here, and they wrote and preserved their history from the early centuries, from the early 20th centuries onwards. And the names were clearly defined. The Gambia is not originated from the word Gambia, but it's rather originated from the word Cambia. Because you know very well that our terms differ from the English etymological aspect. So the name is being borrowed from the word Cambia and then later be reframed into Gambia. Because in Arabic, when you write in the wordings, there are, for example, no provisions for words like P and so on. So terms are being often mispronounced by the foreigners who are newly coming in with some religious ideologies, the context of writing and reading. No, so the names has been reframed. I'm coming to your point that the Gambia was not founded on basis of religion. And I'm telling you that this is from the historical perspective. You can go to the rural communities, you can go to the traditional historians of the country who had the knowledge, who had been existent, who had been originated from here. And they tell you about what was the setting of the country. And you can also read the religious perspective of history. Because Westerner is never honest about history. Not my words, the words of the Westerners themselves. Jane Elliott, the American leading psychologist, who's been famous for her initiation of the class being divided, or the class divided. You know about the class divided was an idea that she initiated to make the American racists, the white supremacists, test the pains of racism. And from that on, she said, Americans or the Westerners are never honest about history. When they claim Christopher Columbus discovered America, Christopher Columbus never discovered America because Muslims were living in Caribbean. This is proven by people who are PhD holders from mainstream history. For example, authors like Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quake, in his book entitled The Arrival, Religion, Muslims, and Islam in America and the Caribbean from on before Columbus. If you read that book, you get to discover hard historical facts that have been referenced to Harvard University historians and so on that defends that certainly Islam in fact had originated from West Africa towards the Americans, and it was already established, and there was a legislation and a system of governance far long before even the Westerners discovered about our existence, talk less of their imposition of their fabricated system of governance.
Yes. I agree that the Westerners are never true when it comes to history. That is evident.
So we're going to rely on them?
No, we're not relying on them. The principle of nationhood is a 17th century concept. Nationhood is a statehood, is a 17th century concept. That is why there was no state prior to 17th century. What existed were kingdoms, clans, family, and so forth. And the Gambia came to be a nation part of the 18th century. And therefore I'm saying, what we call the nation today, Gambia, did not exist prior to colonialism.
I agree. I never said that there was a nation that has been divided or that has been separated, in fact, from other kingdoms. We knew very well the empires, the local kingdoms, the Kabus, whatever, the Somalis, the Songhais, you can name them, the Mansa Musa's times. These were kingdoms that had influence over major parts of West Africa, Northern Africa, and so on. But I am telling you that there was traditional governance in the country long before the invasion of the colonialists. And the traditional governance is the foundation of the Gambia. Because we never left this place.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, one more question.
Yes.
Can you give us a definition of
Please.
Surah An-Nas.
Hello, sir.
1:1. Surah An-Nas.
Please.
Yeah.
May I, please.
Okay.
There will be a time for questions,
Okay.
and you will be opportunity to ask any question that you
Okay, it's okay.
that you want. Mr. Kawsu, can you have the use of the mic?
Yes.
May I please take the opportunity to welcome Ms. Maria Sain. I already did introduce you. Please recognize that she is the very one that I was talking about. Before I go to her, I have a question. You said the community was only set up already and there was a region recognized. I'm a history teacher, and let me give you an example that in the Mandinka, traditional Manding society, you have the Almami and you have the Alcalo. The Almami was the spiritual leader, and the Alcalo, who was in charge of the community, was a secular leader because he doesn't ascribe himself to any religion and doesn't use religious laws to govern his people. Will you also agree that there was already a sense of secularism in our community?
I made it clear from the beginning that historically secularism actually never truly, in fact, originated from the West, the Greek and the Roman philosophers. They just renewed and they framed the term and they made it popular, certainly. They advocated for it to be in a form of governance. But I did tell you that rebellion against the principles of governance of God on earth had existed long before human beings were created. Do you understand? If you look at the historical perspective of religion context, the jinn kind, even the Christian system believes that there is a spiritual world for that. So even the Buddhists, the Sikhs, the Zoroastrians, they all recognize the kingdom of the jinn kind. They are creatures that had existed long before the creation of human beings. According to one historian, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he said they had existed on earth for at least 1,300 years before human beings were created and sent down on earth. Because both the Bible and the Quran agrees on the origin of human beings to be Adam, and then the descendants originated from there. So I did tell you that, of course, rebellion against the principles of God is in fact the foundation of secularism, because secularism is based on three fundamental principles. You just quote from George Holyoake, Galilei of Italy, and so on. All of them agree on those three fundamentals. And what are those three fundamentals? First fundamental is that the state affairs have to be separated from religious affairs. Second is that human beings should not seek success through the spiritual means, but it should be concentrated, humanity should be concentrated on material progress. Then the third principle is that whoever does a good, they did good for themselves, but their good is not expected to be rewarded from a supernatural source. So we agree on those principles. But to say that secularism did exist in our community as a principle at the time, there was a concept of that I told you about. But there was not any advocacy for it to be incorporated and to be established as a legislation of governance.
Let me shift my attention to Ms. Mary saying. I think already we had an agreement that the sense of secularism existed, but what was absent was that there was no advocacy for it to be part of the instrument of governance. And I also just realized there was no instrument for governance at the time. Ms. Mary Sen, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And the reason why it's most important is that we need to have the understanding of secularism from a legal point of view. Does secularism really exist in the Gambia as part of our laws?
If you want to talk about, my apologies. Good afternoon to everyone. Sorry that I came late. I was trying to sort some things out. But yeah, just to answer your question, if you want to look at the legal perspective, secularism has never existed in the laws of this country. If you look at the 1997 Constitution, yes, there is the word secularism under Section 1, subsection 1 of the Constitution. However, that word was inserted illegally. You know, in the Gambia here, for a law, for certain entrenched clauses to be passed, or for instance, you have Section 1, Section 100, subsection 1, which says the National Assembly cannot establish a state religion or whatever. So these things, they have a 50-75 rule, meaning that 75% of those who registered to vote for that particular referendum must vote in favor of what they are tabling. For instance, in the Gambia right now, if we want to make the Gambia a secular state, 75% of those who voted must vote yes for the Gambia to be a secular state. Now, if you want to look at the legal jurisprudence of the Gambia, we have the case of Kemeseng Jammeh versus the state, wherein he went to the Supreme Court to declare the unconstitutionality of Section 1, subsection 1. And yes, the court ruled that it was inserted illegally because it did not go through the necessary legal processes it should have gone through for it to be included in the Constitution. So to answer your question, Gambia has never been a secular state, not in any of the laws of this country.
Rightly so. What the Supreme Court held in the case of Kemeseng Jammeh versus the state in 2001 was that there was a fault in the procedure to amend Section 1, subsection 1.
Yes.
That is Section 226 sub 4, which required that an entering clause be taken through a referendum was not followed.
Yeah, in fact, if you look at Section 226 of the Constitution, I think it has a list of all the entrenched clauses in the Constitution.
Exactly.
Now, none of those clauses cannot be entrenched without a referendum. And issues of secularism, for instance, is one of them. So although it was inserted, but it didn't go to a referendum. That's why I say, it was void, yes.
Yes. If that agreement, I want to understand, does the presence of the word there or the absence of the word means that there's no secularism, or it needs to be stated clearly that there's secularism?
It is there, they failed to remove it, but legally, if you want to be honest,
yes,
legally,
yes,
Gambia was never a secular state.
And then section 6 of C of the CRC Act said the CRC must capture the continued existence of the Gambia as a secular state.
See, that's where I have a problem with the Constitutional Review Commission. They were mandated to do a job,
yes,
and perform their functions,
sure,
as per the secular state of the Gambia. I think they should have raised that up, because they are legally minded. It was their responsibility to let the National Assembly know that we cannot perform this function because we are not a secular state. At that point, they should have raised it up. But now we are getting to a point where they have failed to insert the word secular, which is really a contradiction as per their functions. So yes, it is stated in section 6 of the Constitutional Review Act that they should perform their functions as per the secular state or secular nature of the Gambia, but they should have been able to raise that up. I don't know why they didn't. The chairperson hasn't really come up with any explanation as to why they didn't, but I think they should have raised it. Maybe that would have helped us at the state that we are in right now.
Then, I want to wonder, why would the drafters of the CRC Act 2017 captured in clear terms the continued existence of the Gambia as a secular state?
See, that is quite subjective. One will think that performing their functions will mean automatically Gambia will be a secular state, even if the draft comes in, because it says continued, like you said. But for someone who knows the legal history of the Gambia, the first thing you will say is, but we were never a secular state as per the Constitution. So why would they perform their functions as per the continued state of the Gambia?
So you want me to believe that there's a mess or there's a legal error?
They should have corrected that way before it was passed in Parliament. I think they should have. But so many people didn't notice it, I think. So many people.
I did notice it. In fact, I wrote an article that the Gambia is a secular state with clear reference, and I did cite that section.
You know, at that time, so many students, especially new intakes, that are reading the Constitution for the first time, that don't know the legal history of the Gambia. If you see it, because it is in the Constitution,
sure,
anyone that doesn't know the country will read it and think we're a secular state. But if you understand the history, you will know that this word was inserted illegally. It was null and void. So unless and until you know that, you can never raise something like that, like Section 6 of the CRC Act.
Now, I want to get from your point of view. I jump, instead of asking you to first establish what is the legal understanding of a secular state?
Before I answer that question, I think we're trying to complex things a lot. This is something very easy and straightforward. I've heard you mention the 3 components or what constitutes secularism. But if we look at let me just bring this down for everyone to understand. If you want to talk about policies, if you want to talk about laws, these are things that guide individuals in the country, or in another instance, the state and the people, right? But if you look at the word secularism, in fact, if you look at the whole, let's look at Section 1, subsection 1 of the 1997. Don't just choose the word secular. Read the whole sentence. The Gambia is a secular republic, right? It doesn't say the Gambian people. It says the Gambia. And what can you get from that? The Gambia as a state. What governs the Gambia as a state? It's the combination of state institutions, right? Now, these state institutions are considered secular, meaning in performing their functions, when it comes to legal drafting, developing policies, making decisions, none of those things should be guided by religion affiliations or religious principles or what they believe. They should be guided by what will benefit the whole country as a state, not putting one religion over the other, or the state considering to build its policies or design its structures according to religion. So what it means is there should be a clear line, a clear distinction between the functions and what the state comes up with and the people of the Gambia. Like I said, if you want to read the section holistically and not just decide to choose one and leave the other out, it says the Gambia shall be a secular republic. And I think people should read it in that form. I mean, if you look at constitutional law, for instance, it's not something you decide, okay, we have the draft, right? People are submitting their what do I call it? Their position papers. Yeah, when you're doing something like that, you pick certain sections of the Constitution that you have problem with, and then you place a position paper to the CRC. But if you want to understand what really is in the Constitution, you need to read the whole thing holistically, right? For instance, it doesn't say that the Gambia is a secular state, but if you read the Constitution as a whole, we already have guiding principles and provisions in the Constitution that already define what secularism is, right? Now, personally, right, as someone that is very, I study constitutional law, right? If I have to read the mind of the drafters of this Constitution, I think they're trying to play smart with the people. They thought that they could avoid the situation that we're in right now, when in reality, they were not really doing that, right? So they decided to bring in everything that constitutes secularism and put it in different sections of the Constitution and left the word secularism out. That is what they did. So my question to them is, if you can do all of that, if you can invest so much energy in all of that, why will you leave one word that is made up of 7 letters or 8 out of the Constitution? What purpose will it defeat if you leave it out? So for me, I think there are so many provisions in the Constitution that requires our energy as Gambians. We are not paying attention to it. But we are so invested in this word secular that I don't understand why.
May I intervene to that?
Yes, rightly so. Let me have it.
Yes.
Yes, you can.
You see, my sister, the point she's raised is quite relevant. Why is the entire nation concentrating and focusing their attention on the exclusion and omission of secularism instead of so many other things, of course, that are of concern as well? But this word has taken the attention of people. My sister, it has taken the attention of people because this word's inclusion means the drowning of the state. It means just the state is dead and the people are dead. That's what it means. I'll give you lots of convincing examples. You see, I'm trying to reframe the structure and the definitions of the term to mean from a different legal perspective. A secular republic could mean only the policy implementation and coordination need to be independent of religious affairs and not actually the people governing that affair. No, this is not how the founders of secularism explained or educated us about secularism. It's like I wrote my book and I teach my people about the book, and then you read the book and tell the people what I did not mean. You try to misinterpret my book. Because when you come to the origin, the etymology of secularism, they've already clarified to us. The people talking about secularism in our country, it is a strange term to all of us. It is a term that has been imported. It never existed from our systems of governance, neither from our religious, nor from our cultural, nor from our societal. So it's a term that has been imported from the West. So the Westerner gives it the definition and we accept it with that definition. We cannot give it any other better definition than the founders themselves. And they clarify to us that they mean separating state affairs from religious affairs. So religion cannot have any influence on moral behavior of the state. Religion cannot have any influence on any decision that the state makes. Religion cannot have any influence on any policy that the state makes. Religion cannot have any influence on any activity the state conducts. Religion cannot have any influence on whatever the people that are in charge of state affairs do. So combining all these terms together, you are practically rejecting people's religion from their professional lives. That's exactly what it's doing. That means I come from a religious background, but my religious knowledge, my religious beliefs cannot come into play when it comes to execution of my state duties. So this is forcing the people, it is ripping the people of their faith. Now, second thing, or the second damage it will do to our nation. Look at the Western world today. America, from the Uniform Crime Report, obtained from the FBI, they recorded in 2018 more than 127,000 rape cases. More than 127,000 rape cases. Now in India, according to CNBC, 23rd September 2012 publication, every 22nd they record a rape case. Now if you look at countries like Papua New Guinea, per annum they record rape cases between 40 to 60,000 rape cases, violent rape cases per year. Now you come to the moderate of the United States. In Chicago alone, 2017, more than 17,000 black teenagers have been gunned down by their fellows over little issues. Now, all this comes into play. Today, the Western world is sick. People are committing suicide at a very high rate, even though they have millions and trillions of dollars in their accounts. People cannot live together in a unified community because that sickness of racism and white supremacy still exists in them. Now, to cure or to deal with the sickness and the problems of the world must allow the spiritual enlightenment to come into play. And that's what secularism blocks. It tries to separate the people that are defendants of the solutions to the community to allow the invasion and the spread of the diseases to keep infecting people and then conquering the people, and then the people all get live in sickness, and there will be no solution to it. So the rape cases in the world, allowing secularism in the Gambia will mean the following. Number one, prostitution will arise. It will escalate at an uncontrolled manner. And when that happens, the state, from a legal perspective, you are a legal practitioner. From a legal perspective, since it's a secular state, the state cannot intervene and tell the people, you know what, this is an immoral activity, you cannot do this, or therefore, this is what they choose to live their life with. So the more prostitution is rampant, the more illnesses we welcome. You know very well that when you go to public hospital, if you're lucky, you are given a paracetamol and some other painkillers to go ahead. So we don't have the medication to counter, to deal with those outcasts of the diseases that are coming in rampant that will result from prostitution. We'll have a high moderate because people are not controlled and they are not threatening and they are not, restricted by the mild to or whatever punishment measures that the state may take against them. People are being restricted by the supernatural created source of creation, the supernatural power that is the source of the creation, that is the power that controls the people from attaining and from committing certain crimes. Assuming you leave your mobile phone here and you walk out to this door and I was sitting here alone, maybe there are no cameras. What will prevent me from picking your phone and putting it in my bag and walking away is that supernatural power which is saving your mobile phone for you. Secularism actually will not allow you, will not give you the chance of getting that phone back. Murder rate will increase, crime rates will increase, prostitution will increase, illnesses will come over, divisiveness, ethnocentrism will increase. In the US, for example, you have the Ku Klux Klan, what they call KKK. The Ku Klux Klan writes on their badges, supported by the state, by the FBI, right on their public badges. You can cite this on the media. We want white, underline that word white, not Christian, white Christian America. Whoever dislikes that, you can go ahead and act stupid. This is what the KKK writes on their badges, and this is what they wear over public places, annoying the people. And according to records, they have killed more than 100,000 people. From the days of independence of America to date, more than 100,000 black men have been murdered, including the father of the famous Malcolm X. So the KKK have been conducting those kind of things in the name of supremacy, the racism. So if there was secularism in the country, or if the Gambians allow secularism in the country, the Gambia is directly going to ethnocentrism. The Gambia is directly inviting the gates of hell onto itself. So this is why the people are so much concentrated on the term, because allowing the term in the constitution will welcome all kinds of illnesses in the country.
Yeah. Thank you for your submission. Let me do some fact-finding here.
Sorry, before you go forward, I just love to bring it up to him that the country he made mention of, the KKK is where they are. In that country is not a secular state.
No, I'm not saying that country.
But they're still doing things
yes,
like
no, they're living on the principles of secularism. Yes.
Right? In the Gambia here, if the National Assembly, for instance, do I have to? I can go ahead.
You should have had two.
Yeah, I think I should be holding the mic instead. Yes. Long enough?
That's fine. I think there's a difference when a law says that rape is prohibited. When a law says rape is prohibited, when a law says rape is prohibited for Muslims only, and when a law says rape is prohibited for Christians only. Now, for any person that cares about humanity in general, which one will you vote for? Rape is prohibited for all. That is what secularism promotes. In all countries in this world, look at Sudan, for instance. Look at Somalia. Look at all these other Muslim states. They are killing, they are raping, but what? They are in a situation or state where you want the Gambia to be right now. I don't think that is enough. In the Gambia here, like before President Yahya Jammeh, right? Mr. Jawad, welcome. Before President Yahya Jammeh mutilated the constitution 58 times, we had one of the best constitutions in this country. But that was not enough to save the people of the Gambia. What we need is beyond our policies. We can have perfect laws. We can have the constitution of the Gambia very silent on constitution, but people will still do what they want to do. For me personally, and I think so many people in this country, they call themselves Muslims because they are born in Muslim homes. If they were not, more than 50% of them will not be Muslims. That's the honest conversation we need to have.
Good. See, this allegation, I need to respond.
It's not an allegation, it's a fact.
No, it's an allegation.
Yeah,
Let me clarify. I need to respond.
Yeah,
It's fair enough to give
you definitely, because I am here on behalf of the audience, and I'm losing some questions that I want to put forward. That's why I wanted to stop before and ask my question. I need to do some fact checking here.
What is raised need to be responded on for clarification to be made on the state. What's raised is a serious allegation against the principles of Islam, which is not understood by us as he explained.
Yes,
she put 3 words. Let me just learn that word. She put 3 words that put in a law that says that rape is prohibited for Muslims only, or rape is prohibited for Christians only, or rape is prohibited for all. Which one would you vote for? Actually, my sister, from the Islamic perspective, there is no law that would only prohibit evil for only Muslims. So you do not understand that term.
So if you agree with me on that, then you mean secularism should be promoted?
No.
Yes.
I did not say that.
No,
Islam is
allow me
different
to
from secularism. But I am telling you that there is not a single law of Islam that prohibits evil for only Muslims, and the rest of the people
If
can
you're
go
saying
ahead
that,
and
then we're on the same page.
Okay, exactly. But you are putting it into secular, and if you put it secular, you are contradicting.
No, because you made mention of other countries raping. You said if Gambia becomes a secular state, there will be prostitution,
I said that
there will be rape, which is not true.
The spiritual content. I think you need to be mature in your presentation.
No, I'm not being mature. You're being irrational in your presentation. That's what you're doing.
No.
Come on. If you want to put the
Sir,
words
sir,
to be untrue.
sir.
You're being irrational. That's all.
Yeah. Please.
Calm down. Take some water and drink.
I'm good.
May I please use the opportunity to welcome Mr. Mari Jabate. I did already introduce you, read a long list of your academic achievements behind you, and now he will join us in the conversation. I think the reason why we're having this conversation here, and the reason why we have you in the panel is that I said it over and over. National discourse requires reason instead of emotions. Anytime we employ emotions, we lost control of the discussion. And I appeal that, please, let's keep it calm. Mr. Kawsu,
yes.
you did raise some lot of points here regarding the crime rate and so forth, and you specifically point at the United States. World Population Review 2018, the population, the states that are listed there having the highest crime rate, America do not even appear in the list of all those countries named. You have Venezuela.
It does according to my records. I have the hard facts. I can show it too.
According to my research, World Population Review.
Your research, thank you.
Yes. According to the World Population, Review, which is, in my own opinion, the latest, it says Venezuela, Papua New Guinea, which you name, I agree, South Africa,
Belize.
Yeah, Afghanistan, and so forth. I named there, and the United States of America is not listed there. Yes, according to my research. Now, laws that are made, do you think laws that are made are enough? Laws made through religion are what really scale down the rate of crimes that are being committed?
You do not understand my point, neither does she. my point was not focus on the legal perspective and how a strict law will help to minimize a crime. That's not my point. My point was on what role religion plays in a country in minimizing domestic crime. That was my point. So you misunderstood the term. Talking about crime and problems in Sudan and other countries, you know, if you start discussing the root causes of those problems here, you'll get to know that Islam has nothing to play with that. If you read the glorious Quran, chapter 5, verse 32, God Almighty did reveal there that He ordained unto human beings, whosoever shall kill a single innocent soul or cause mischief, that means start anything, any initiative, stop public peace, it is as the sin of that crime is as if you have killed the whole of humankind. And whosoever shall endeavor to save one life or to stop one criminal activity that can give birth to all kinds of dark situations for our country, it is as the person has also saved the whole of humanity. Now we believe our prophet came with a mission of peace, a mission to salvage the world, a mission to stabilize the world, a mission to disappear crime in the country without having to impose strict policies. Of course, the policies play for criminals who will never listen. But my point was not on the strict policies of Islam is what is going to help the country to gain stability. I did not say that. Okay. What I said was the spirituality of the nation has a role in maintaining peace and stability in the country. Now, promoting or introducing secularism will discourage people from religious activities, and then it will kill the spiritual beliefs of the people. And when their spirituality is killed in them, then they are out of control. They live according to the material chase, as it is put forward by the secularists themselves. Yes. That the world should be concentrated on the pursuit for materialism. And if materialism is the concentration and the focus, then that will give birth to a lot of competitions that will include taking up arms against each other, like it is common in our country nowadays. People are trying to rob each other's little articles from them. So in a highly enlightened spiritual society, the police are not needed in the community to keep the community safe, because everybody is controlled by a power that is more powerful than the police and than the laws that may threaten them. That's exactly the point I was putting.